Hey guys, I want to talk about Cheryl Elizabeth Levitt, her daughter Suzanne Streeter, and Suzanne's friend Stacy McCall. Cheryl and her daughter Suzanne resided in the 1700 block of East Delmar Street in Springfield, Missouri in 1992. Suzanne graduated from Kickapoo High School during the evening of June 6, 1992. She spent the early part of the evening having dinner at home with her mother. Suzanne and her friend Stacy McCall planned to spend the night at a hotel in Branson, Missouri. They decided to stay at another friend's home in Battlefield, Missouri instead. Suzanne called Cheryl at around 10:30 p.m. to discuss their plans. Cheryl telephoned a friend at around 11:15 p.m. that evening. She was painting a chest of drawers at the time and gave no indication that anything was wrong inside her residence. Suzanne and Stacy returned to Cheryl's residence at around 2:15 a.m. on June 7th after deciding that their friend's home was too crowded. They planned to meet other friends at Whitewater Amusement Park in Branson later in the day. The girls drove their separate vehicles to Cheryl's house. Neither they nor Cheryl have been heard from again. Neighbors did not hear any suspicious activity near Cheryl's home during the overnight hours. One of the girls' friends phoned and visited Cheryl's residence several times during the day in an attempt to locate the three women. Stacy's family alerted authorities about the disappearances during the evening of June 7th. All of the women's personal belongings were discovered inside the house. Their vehicles were also parked at the home. Cheryl's bed appeared to have been slept in during the previous night. Her glasses were beside her bed, and a book had been turned over, indicating that Cheryl may have been interrupted while reading. The family's Yorkshire Terrier, Cinnamon, was still inside the house and appeared to be anxious. All of Cheryl's personal belongings were untouched, and the television was turned on. There was no sign of a struggle at the residence, but the porch light had been shattered. No additional physical evidence was discovered at the scene. Authorities now believe that the broken glass from the porch light may have provided clues about the disappearances. A friend of the girls swept the shards into the garbage, unaware that he was discarding possible evidence at the time. Investigators noted that Cheryl and Suzanne's cigarettes and lighters were still inside the house. The three women's purses were placed together on the stairs. The blinds in Suzanne's room were pulled apart, as if someone had been looking outside. Authorities later admitted that the crime scene had possibly been tainted by the 20 or so loved ones who visited Cheryl's house after the disappearances were reported. No one realized the seriousness of the situation until nearly 24 hours had passed. Officers left a note on Cheryl's door asking her to call the police department and cancel the missing persons reports when she and the girls returned home. An extensive search of the surrounding areas produced no clues as to the women's whereabouts. Robert Craig Cox, a convicted robber serving time on unrelated charges in a Texas prison, was identified as a possible suspect in the case. He had been convicted of murder in Florida, but his conviction was reversed. Cox lived in Springfield at the time of the women's disappearances, and he had worked with Stacy's father at a local car dealership. He initially told investigators that he was not in the Springfield area on June 7th, but later recanted his statement. Cox also told a journalist that he knew the women had been murdered and buried near Levitt's home, but he claimed that their remains would never be discovered. Authorities are uncertain if Cox was involved in the case or if he is seeking attention by issuing false statements. Cox has never been charged in connection with the disappearances. A witness reported observing a woman, matching Suzanne's description, driving an older model Moss green Dodge van later during the day on June 7th. The witness claimed that the woman appeared to be terrified, as an unseen male's voice told her, quote, "Don't do anything stupid," unquote. The witness did not contact investigators with her account until several days had passed. Additional witnesses reported seeing the Dodge van in different areas of Springfield after the women's disappearances. A man told authorities that he saw the blonde female sitting in the driver's seat of a similar vehicle in the parking lot of a local grocery store. The individual said that he wrote the van's license plate number on a newspaper as the vehicle seemed suspicious. The man threw the paper away before contacting investigators. Law enforcement officials agreed to hypnotize the man, but he was only able to provide the plate's first three digits. Authorities have been unable to determine if a van was involved in the women's cases. A server at George's Steakhouse, one of Cheryl's favorite Springfield restaurants, reported seeing the women in the establishment between 1 and 3 a.m. on June 7th. The employee claimed that Cheryl, Suzanne, and Stacy arrived and departed together. She said that Suzanne appeared to be intoxicated as the group left the restaurant, and Cheryl was attempting to calm her down. Investigators have never confirmed the possible sighting, and it is not clear if the women visited the eatery before their disappearances. Other witnesses reported hearing a woman's screams and the squeal of tires in eastern Greene County, Missouri, during the early hours of June 7th. Officials searched the area, but no evidence related to the case was located. A composite sketch of an unidentified transient man was released in the days after the disappearances. The individual was allegedly spotted near Cheryl and Suzanne's residence in early June 1992. Authorities do not know if the man was involved in the case. Cheryl's son and Suzanne's older brother, Barrett Streeter, and one of Suzanne's former boyfriends were ruled out as suspects in the case early in the investigation. An anonymous caller phoned America's Most Wanted's hotline after the program profiled the women's cases in late December 1992. The caller was disconnected before he could speak to Springfield investigators. Authorities believe that the person held vital information connected to the disappearances. Despite public pleas for assistance, the individual never contacted authorities again. Several officials charged the former chief of police of impeding their investigation into the case in the late 1990s. Others dispute that contention and said that little evidence was available in the case from its onset. One of the original investigators theorized that the women's assailant or assailants took Cinnamon, their dog, out of Cheryl's yard during the overnight hours of June 7th in an effort to gain access to the residence. The officer speculated that the attacker, or attackers, knocked on the door pretending to have rescued the dog after it wandered away from the home. The investigator theorized that one of the women may have opened the door to retrieve Cinnamon and was overempowered by the assailant or assailants. Cheryl's background was investigated as other leads proved futile. She and Suzanne moved to the Springfield area in 1980 from Seattle, Washington. Cheryl divorced her first husband, Brent Streeter, shortly after Suzanne's birth. She told friends that Brent believed they should divorce and continue living together. His plan would have allowed Cheryl to qualify for welfare assistance. Cheryl decided to end their relationship instead. She moved into an apartment complex in Seattle and stayed home with Suzanne and Bart for 6 months after Suzanne's birth. Cheryl received free rent while performing repair work around the complex. Cheryl and Suzanne moved into their home on East Delmar Street in April 1992, 2 months before their disappearances. Cheryl's 1989 divorce from her second husband, Don Lovett, impacted her finances, and she elected to relocate to the smaller residence with her daughter. Don's creditors began asking Cheryl to pay his debts after their divorce. She hired an attorney to locate him without success. Cheryl was employed at New Attitudes Hair Salon on West Sunshine Street in Springfield in 1992. She had 250 clients at the time of her disappearance and was considered a model employee. Her family members described her as a private person who had a close relationship with Streeter in 1992. The women's relatives had them both declared legally deceased in 1997, 5 years after their disappearances. A bench was dedicated to them in Victims Memorial Garden in Springfield's Phelps Grove Park in the same year. Their cases remain unsolved. Cheryl Elizabeth Levitt was born on November 1st, 1994. She's been missing since June 7th, 1992, from Springfield, Missouri. At the time of her disappearance, she was 47 years old, 5 feet tall, and 110 pounds. She's a Caucasian female with bleach blonde hair and brown eyes. She has freckles on her neck and on her upper chest. Her ears are pierced. Her maiden name is Williams. Cheryl was a cigarette smoker at the time of her 1992 disappearance. She wears glasses, but her pair was located inside her residence. Suzanne Elizabeth Streeter was born on March 9, 1973. She's been missing since June 7, 1992, from Springfield, Missouri. At the time of her disappearance, she was 19 years old, between 5 feet 2 and 5 feet 5, and 102 pounds. She's a Caucasian female with bleach blonde hair and brown eyes. She has a scar on her upper right forearm. She has a small tumor on the left corner of her mouth, which gives the appearance of chewing tobacco. Suzanne has large-sized teeth with no previous dental work. Both of her ears are pierced. Her left ear is pierced twice, including a hole in the upper portion of her ear. Her nickname is Susie. Stacy Kathleen McCall was born on April 23, 1974. She's been missing since June 7, 1992, from Springfield, Missouri. At the time of her disappearance, she was 18 years old, 5 feet 3, and 120 pounds. She's a Caucasian female with blonde hair and blue eyes. Her hair is lightened from the sun at the ends. She has facial freckles. Stacy has an off-centered cleft in her chin and birthmarks on her chin, near her lip, and on her right arm. Her ears are pierced. Stacy had a tan complexion at the time of her 1992 disappearance. If you have any information, please call the Springfield Police Department at 417-864-1810.